A fork scraped porcelain, soft, almost polite, and somehow it sounded like a gunshot. Not because it was loud, because the man holding it didn't make noises by accident. Lovely was the kind of French restaurant where the air itself felt expensive. Crystal chandeliers throwing cold light across white tablecloths. Waiters moving like shadows. Guests laughed in half voices as if volume was beneath them. The kind of place where the rich pretended they weren't hungry, just curious. Then Ethan Caldwell took one bite. He didn't cough. He didn't flinch. He just stopped. Across the dining room, a conversation died mid-laugh. A woman froze with a wine glass halfway to her lips. A man leaned back like he'd been warned by a sound only he could hear. Even the pianist, playing something delicate and forgettable, hit a note that hung too long, then quietly corrected it, hands trembling. Because everyone in New York's dining scene knew a single truth. When Ethan Caldwell goes silent, people lose everything. Ethan wasn't just a billionaire who collected restaurants like trophies. He was something far worse, an eater with power. The kind of critic who didn't need a newspaper column because his opinion traveled faster than print. The kind of man whose private dinners could elevate a chef into legend or bury them so deep their knives never touched a pass again. And now he was staring at a plate of sea bass like it had personally betrayed him. A manager in a tailored suit hurried over, smile stretched too tight to be real. "Mr. Caldwell," he said softly, like speaking near a sleeping tiger, "is everything to your satisfaction?" Ethan didn't look up. He tapped his knife once against the plate, tick, and that tiny sound snapped the room even quieter. The manager's smile flickered, and he swallowed like he could taste fear. Ethan finally lifted his eyes. They were calm, not angry, something colder than angry. "Who cooked this?" he asked. 3 words. No raised voice. No théâtrix. Yet the manager paled like the question was a threat. "Chef Gustave Thorne prepared your—" "Bring him," Ethan said, cutting through the sentence as cleanly as a blade. "Now." The manager nodded too fast, nearly tripping over his own shoes as he backed away. Guests leaned subtly toward the table, pretending not to stare, while staring anyway. The chandeliers glittered above them, indifferent. The restaurant's prestige suddenly felt like fragile glass. Behind the swinging kitchen doors, Lovely was a different universe. Heat, steam, metal clanging, tickets spitting out like machine gun fire. And at the center of it, head chef Gustave Thorne moved like a general, only instead of strategy, he used volume. "Table 12 wants more bread. Why is that my problem?" "Move." Gustave barked, face red, thick fingers jabbing at a plate, as if intimidation improved flavor. "Sauce is breaking. Who did this? Who touched my station?" A line cook muttered an apology. Another cook pretended not to hear. Nobody wanted Gustave's attention. And then Gustave saw her. "Sarah," he snapped, like her name was something sour. "You're daydreaming again. Water for table 7. Now." Sarah Miller didn't argue. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't even sigh. She simply reached for a tray, hands moving with practiced efficiency, and said, "Yes, chef," in a voice so quiet it barely competed with the kitchen noise. That was the thing about Sarah. She had learned how to disappear. At 26, her face carried a fatigue that didn't match her age, tired eyes, guarded expression, a stillness that suggested she'd learned to survive by becoming unnoticeable. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun. Her uniform, a plain black dress slightly too large, hung on her like she'd lost weight faster than she could replace it. To the guests, she was furniture. To the kitchen staff, she was labor. The extra shift girl. The one who scrubbed floors after closing. The one who took blame because she didn't fight back. The one you could insult without consequences because nobody important cared if she cried. But Sarah didn't cry. She just moved. She carried plates past the pass and caught something that made her stomach tighten. Gustave was plating Ethan Caldwell's dish again, reconstructing it, fussing like a man trying to patch a sinking boat with gold leaf. He smeared sauce with the back of spoon, too heavy-handed. The reduction looked slightly sharp, slightly wrong. The fish, overhandle brushed. A dish trying to look confident while secretly panicking. Sarah's eyes flickered over the plate, and a small muscle in her jaw jumped. She could smell the imbalance from 3 feet away. Too much vinegar. Not enough patience. A mistake that would be invisible to most customers, but not to him. And the moment Sarah thought the word him, her skin went cold. Because it wasn't just a billionaire diner. It wasn't just a scary critic. It was Ethan Caldwell, a name Sarah hadn't heard out loud in years, yet her body reacted like the past had just kicked down a door. She forced her gaze down. She forced her breathing steady. She forced her face into neutral nothingness. But her mind wasn't neutral. It was racing. Because Sarah knew something nobody else in Lovely knew. Something the manager didn't know. Something Gustav definitely didn't know. Ethan Caldwell wasn't here by accident. He didn't simply walk into Lovely on a whim. He had come for a reason tied to a dish, a reason tied to a person who shouldn't exist here. Sarah, a voice cracked through the kitchen. Chef, Caldwell wants you out front. Gustav's posture instantly changed, like a performer hearing his cue. He smoothed the front of his coat and ran a hand over his hair. A smug smile tried to form, but trembled at the corners. Of course he does, Gustav said, as if being summoned by the most feared critic in the city was an honor, not a warning. He glanced around, enjoying the attention. Watch and learn, amateurs. He strode toward the doors. Sarah stood perfectly still as he passed. And then Gustav, as if he couldn't resist, leaned closer to her and hissed, "If this goes wrong, it's on you. You're bad luck, Miller. You walk into a room, and everything burns." The words hit like a slap, sharp, familiar, poisonous. Sarah's fingers tightened around her tray until her knuckles went pale. For half a second, a flicker of something dangerous passed behind her eyes. Not anger, control, as if she were holding back a part of herself that could ruin him. She swallowed it down. "Understood, chef," she said softly. Gustav scoffed and pushed through the swinging doors into the dining room. The second he left, the kitchen exhaled like it had been holding its breath. Then the breath caught again, because Sarah hadn't moved. She stared at the door, like she could see through it, like she could already hear what was happening on the other side. And then, faint, muffled through layers of luxury and distance, Sarah heard Ethan Caldwell's voice. Not loud, just clear. "Who cooked this?" he repeated. Sarah's heart did something it hadn't done in years. It dropped. A line cook brushed past her. "Miller, you okay?" Sarah blinked once, twice, then nodded too fast. "Fine." But she wasn't fine. Because Ethan's question wasn't really about the food. It was about identity, about skill, about a signature that can't be faked. Somewhere deep in Sarah's memory, another kitchen existed, smaller, warmer, smelling of bread and garlic and family. Her father's restaurant. Her hands moving fast, confident, plating dishes people cried over because they tasted like home. Then smoke. Then flames. Then the headlines. Then the rumors. She did it. She burned it down. She wanted the insurance. She wanted attention. Lies repeated so often they became truth. Sponsors vanished. Mentors went silent. Opportunities evaporated. And somehow, the people who benefited the most bought up half the city's dining scene right after. Sarah had learned what power looks like when it smiles. Now she was in Lovely, hiding behind a fake resume, pretending she was nothing more than a tired waitress. And Ethan Caldwell, the man who could pull the truth out of a room just by asking a question, was sitting out there waiting. A new ticket was printed. Another plate slid by. Another command barked. But Sarah's world narrowed to one thing. The door. Because she knew Gustav would take credit. He always did. But Ethan didn't sound like a man ready to applaud. He sounded like a man ready to expose someone. Sarah's tray trembled slightly. She steadied it with her other hand. And at that exact moment, the kitchen doors swung again. A busser rushed in, eyes wide. "Sarah, Chef Gustav wants you out front." "Now." Sarah froze. "What?" she whispered. The busser swallowed. Caldwell asked for the chef, and then he asked for you. The kitchen went quiet in that instant, like the entire staff had collectively stopped moving. Even the pans seemed to hiss more softly. Sarah's stomach twisted. Her mouth went dry. Her legs felt heavy, as if the floor was trying to hold her in place. Because if Ethan Caldwell was asking for her, that meant one terrifying possibility. He recognized her. And if he recognized her, then the life she built on silence was about to collapse in public. If you were Sarah, blacklisted, blamed, and finally hidden, would you step into that dining room or run out the back door and never look back? Tell me in the comments, What would you do right now? Sarah took one breath, then another, and forced her feet to move toward the door, toward the chandeliers, the stairs, the billionaire who never forgot a taste. And as her hand reached for the swinging door, one thought thundered in her mind. What if Ethan wasn't here to save her, but to finish what the fire started? So why would the most feared critic in the world demand a waitress, and what secret could possibly make Sarah the only person in Lublin who can't afford to be seen? The dining room didn't just watch Sarah. It measured her. The second she stepped through the swinging doors, the entire atmosphere changed, like the room had been waiting for a missing piece and now didn't know what to do with it. Sarah felt it instantly, the weight of eyes that weren't used to looking at people like her. Wealthy patrons in tailored suits and dresses that shimmered under chandelier light. Men who held their glasses like trophies. Women who smiled without warmth. People who paid to feel superior, and now had been interrupted mid-superiority by something unexpected, a waitress being summoned to a billionaire's table. Sarah kept her head slightly down, posture straight, face neutral. She moved the way invisible people learn to move, quiet, efficient, no sudden gestures that invite judgment. But inside, everything was loud. Her heartbeat, her breathing, the old panic she'd trained herself to bury. She could see Chef Gustav standing beside Ethan Caldwell's table, shoulders squared, hands clasped behind his back like he belonged in a portrait. Gustav's face was a mask of practiced confidence, but his jaw was tight, and his eyes kept flicking toward Sarah like she was a problem he hadn't planned for. Ethan sat in the center of it all like gravity. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look angry. He looked certain. His suit was dark and perfectly fitted, the kind of quiet luxury that didn't need logos. His watch caught chandelier light for a moment, silver, cold. His face was composed, but his eyes did not match the calm of the rest of him. His eyes were searching. Sarah approached the table and stopped at the proper distance, hands folded neatly in front of her. "Yes, sir," she said softly, voice steady by force, not comfort. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at her hands. Not her face. Not her name tag. Not her uniform. Her hands. Sarah felt her pulse jump. Because hands tell stories people don't want to say out loud. A chef's hands carry scars from heat, blades, and speed. A dishwasher's hands carry cracks from chemicals and water. A liar's hands often twitch when truth is nearby. Ethan studied Sarah's fingers like he was reading a document. Then he looked up, finally meeting her eyes. And Sarah's breath nearly stopped. Because recognition flashed, not in his expression, but in the way his focus sharpened, like a lens clicking into place. Gustav spoke quickly, too quickly. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Sarah Miller, one of our servers. If there's been a misunderstanding, I assure you." Ethan raised one finger. Gustav stopped mid-sentence, like the finger had pressed a mute button. The entire table around them seemed to hold its breath, and even nearby diners went still, pretending not to stare, while leaning in anyway. Ethan's voice stayed calm. "Sarah Miller," he repeated, tasting the name like he knew it didn't belong to her. "That's what they call you here." Sarah's throat tightened. "Yes, sir." Ethan's gaze lowered again to her hands. "How long have you worked at Lubley?" Sarah hesitated, only a fraction, then answered. "A few months." Ethan nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that. "And before that?" Sarah felt Gustav's eyes drilling into her, warning her without words. "Say nothing. Don't complicate this. Don't ruin me." Sarah kept her face blank. "Other restaurants," she said. "Small jobs." Ethan's mouth almost formed a smile. "Almost. Small jobs don't teach someone to correct a broken beurre blanc in their head," he said softly. A ripple moved through the nearest diners. Someone whispered, "What did he say?" Another shifted in their chair, like they wanted a better view. Sarah's stomach dropped, because Ethan had just spoken the truth out loud. Someone here had noticed the sauce. Not the manager. Not Gustav. Ethan. And worse, he noticed the mind behind the correction. Gustav forced a laugh that sounded brittle. "Mr. Caldwell, you're giving my staff too much credit. Sarah here is hard-working, but she's not." "Not what?" Ethan asked, turning his eyes to Gustav with a quiet sharpness. "Not talented, not trained, not worthy of being seen." Gustav's smile cracked slightly. "She's a server." Ethan leaned back in his chair, still calm, still in control. Then it's interesting, he said, that the dish I was served carries the fingerprints of someone who thinks like a chef. Sarah's hands clenched instinctively, then relaxed. She still forced them. Ethan watched the micro-movement. Then he spoke again, low enough that only Gustav and Sarah could fully hear. I asked who cooked the dish. He claimed it was him. Gustav Stefanid. Because it was. Ethan tilted his head. No. The single word was quiet, but landed like a verdict. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a black card. No branding, no name, just a thin silver knife etched into one corner. He placed it on the table as if he were placing a weapon down politely. Sarah's eyes flicked to it, and a chill ran through her. Because she knew that symbol. Not from gossip. Not from rumors. From memory. A secret culinary circle. Invite only. The kind of underground network where reputations were bought, sold, and destroyed in private rooms. Where billionaires didn't just eat, they owned chefs' careers and silence. Gustav's eyes widened before he could stop them. He tried to hide it with a scoff. Kuta prop. Ethan didn't react. Line up the kitchen staff, he said to the manager who hovered nearby, sweating through his expensive suit. I want to see their hands. The manager blinked. Their hands, sir. Ethan's gaze didn't move. Yes. The cook I'm looking for has a scar at the base of the thumb. Left hand. A clean slice. Old. The kind you get when you're fast enough to cut yourself and keep working. Sarah's chest tightened. Her left hand tingled as if the scar itself had woken up. Because Sarah had that scar. It wasn't visible from far away, but it was there, faint, pale, and precise. She got it years ago in her father's restaurant, rushing through prep during a dinner rush, refusing to slow down because people depended on her. Ethan had seen it before. The room started to stir. A manager rushed toward the kitchen doors, barking quiet instructions. Staff began to shuffle out, line cooks, sous chefs, dishwashers, confused, annoyed, nervous. Gustav leaned in toward Ethan, voice tense. Mr. Caldwell, this is absurd. You can't humiliate my staff like this. My uncle. Ethan's eyes flicked up. Your uncle owns shares, he said evenly. He does not own me. That shut Gustav up, but the rage in his face didn't disappear. It just sank deeper, becoming something uglier, panic dressed as pride. Sarah stood still, trying to become invisible again. But invisibility was impossible when the spotlight had already chosen you. Ethan looked at her once more. Sarah, he said, voice softer now, almost personal. Do you know what happens to people who hide their gift? Sarah's throat felt like sandpaper. No, sir. They get used by men like him, Ethan said, nodding slightly toward Gustav, until there's nothing left. Gustav snapped, that's enough. Heads turned. Nearby diners leaned in harder now. This wasn't dinner anymore. This was a theater. Ethan remained calm. Is it? He asked Gustav. Then, without raising his voice, he delivered a line so sharp it made Sarah's stomach twist. I know what happened to Sarah Lancaster. Sarah's vision narrowed. Because that name, Sarah Lancaster, wasn't Sarah Miller. It was her real name. The name she hadn't heard spoken in public since the fire. The name is tied to scandal, rumors, and ruin. Gustav blinked, confused for a moment. Who? Ethan's eyes never left Sarah. 3 years ago, he continued, a restaurant burned down. A young chef vanished. The city believed the story because it was convenient. Sarah's lungs forgot how to work. She could feel the room around her shifting, like the air had become thinner. A faint ringing started in her ears. She wanted to deny it, to laugh, to say he was mistaken. But Ethan's gaze told her something terrifying. He wasn't guessing. He knew. The kitchen staff began lining up near the entryway, hands out awkwardly like they were being searched at an airport. People whispered. Phones subtly lifted, recording despite the restaurant's rules. Gustav's face turned a dangerous shade of red. This is insane, he hissed. You're going to accuse my waitress of being some disgraced chef? She's nobody. Ethan finally looked at Gustav fully. Nobody, he repeated. That's what you thought. Then Ethan turned back to Sarah, and his voice dropped so low it felt like it was meant only for her. I didn't come here to ruin you, he said. I came here because I think you were framed. Sarah's knees nearly gave out. Framed. The word hit harder than any insult Gustav had ever thrown at her. Because if Ethan Caldwell believed that, then he was either the first powerful person to say it or the most dangerous liar she'd ever met. Ethan's gaze flicked to her left hand again. "Show them," he said. Sarah didn't move. If she showed them the scar, her disguise would break. The rumors would resurrect. The blacklist would find her again. And Lovely, this prison, would become a courtroom. But if she didn't show them, Ethan would keep pushing. And Gustav would make sure she paid for it later. The room held its breath. Sarah looked down at her left hand. She could feel the scar under her skin, like a brand. Slowly, so slowly the movement felt like it took an entire lifetime, Sarah began to lift her hand. Gustav's eyes widened, and the manager's mouth fell open. Ethan didn't move at all. He just watched. And in that stillness, Sarah realized something even more terrifying. Ethan wasn't asking to see her scar to identify the cook. He was asking her to choose, to stay hidden or step into fire again. If this moment has you holding your breath, subscribe, because what happens when Sarah raises her hand doesn't just expose a secret, it detonates the entire room. Sarah's fingers uncurling felt like a confession. The chandeliers glittered above. The diners leaned in. Gustav's face twisted with hatred. And just before Sarah could fully reveal the scar, a voice from the back of the dining room cut through the silence. "Stop." Everyone turned. A man in an expensive suit stood up, one of the owners, face tight with alarm. He stared at Ethan Caldwell like he'd seen a nightmare walk in wearing a billionaire's smile. And then he looked at Sarah with something like fear. "Don't you dare," the owner said, voice shaking. "Not here. Not again." Sarah's hand froze midair. Not again. What did he mean, not again? And why would a powerful owner sound terrified of a waitress's scar being seen? The word again didn't just hang in the air. It hooked into Sarah's spine like a barbed wire memory. Her hand was still raised halfway, fingers trembling, scar just inches from being seen. The dining room had gone so quiet that even the soft clink of a spoon against glass sounded obscene. Every wealthy face was turned toward her now, eyes wide with curiosity they could pretend was concerned. Then the owner stepped forward. He was polished in that corporate way, expensive suit, perfect hair, a confidence that usually filled rooms. But right now, his confidence looked cracked. His lips were tight. His eyes weren't on Ethan. They were on Sarah's hand. "Don't you dare," he said again, voice shaking in a way that didn't match his money. "Not here. Not again." Micro cliffhanger. Sarah's mind grabbed that phrase like a lifeline, "not again," and realized it didn't mean scandal. It meant repeating something. Ethan Caldwell didn't move. He didn't blink. He just watched the owner with the stillness of a man who already knew the ending. Gustav seized the moment like a drowning man grabbing a rope. "Mr. Leroux," he said quickly, recognizing the owner as a shield. "Thank you. This is nonsense. Caldwell is humiliating my staff. Sarah is just a server." "Shut up," Leroux snapped, the sudden harshness shocking even Gustav. Micro cliffhanger. Gustav's mouth stayed open for a second too long, because if the owner could silence him that fast, then Gustav wasn't as protected as he thought. Sarah's chest tightened. She stared at Leroux, trying to place his face. She'd seen him before, maybe in the back office, maybe at staff briefings when executives toured. But she'd never seen fear on him. Fear is like recognition. Leroux looked at her and swallowed. "Put your hand down," he said, soft and out, almost pleading. "Please. Please." The word didn't belong to a man like him. Not said to a waitress. Not said in front of a billionaire and a dining room full of rich witnesses. It was wrong, so wrong it made Sarah's stomach turn. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the owner wasn't afraid of Ethan's power. He was afraid of her being identified. Sarah lowered her hand slowly, as if gravity had increased. She forced her face blank, even as her thoughts screamed. Ethan's gaze flicked to her, and something almost human moved across his expression. Approval? Sympathy? Or a warning that she just missed her chance? Then Ethan spoke, voice quiet enough that the entire room leaned in to catch it. "Interesting," he said. "You're begging her to hide, like you've done this before." Leroux's eyes flashed. "This is my restaurant," he hissed. "You don't get to." "Oh, I do," Ethan said, cutting him off without raising his voice. "Because you invited me here." Micro cliffhanger. The diners exchanged looks. Invited? Ethan wasn't a random customer. This was arranged. Gustav turned sharply. You invited him. His confidence faltered for the first time, and in that falter, Sarah saw the truth. Gustav had assumed Ethan came because of him, because of his genius, because of his ego. Leroux didn't answer Gustav. He was staring at Ethan like a man staring at a judge. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Let's stop pretending, he said. You and I both know why I'm here. You needed me to confirm something. Sarah's pulse hammered. Confirm what? That Gustav was lying? That Lovely's reputation was inflated? That someone in the building had real talent? Or that someone in the building was Sarah Lancaster? Ethan turned his head toward Sarah again. Sarah, he said gently, using her fake name like a blade wrapped in velvet. Tell me something. When you heard me ask who cooked this, why did you freeze? Every eye snapped back to her. Sarah's throat tightened. Her mouth went dry. If she spoke, she risked everything. If she stayed silent, she looked guilty. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized there was no safe answer, only different kinds of danger. Gustav stepped forward, aggressive. Because she's incompetent, he said loudly, trying to reclaim control through cruelty. She freezes because she's slow, and she knows she'll get fired. Ethan's gaze shifted to Gustav, and the temperature of the room seemed to drop. You talk too much for someone who didn't cook the dish, he said. Gustav's face reddened. I cooked it. Ethan tilted his head, then described the last step, the final 30 seconds before it left the pass. Gustav blinked once. Micro cliffhanger. It was a tiny pause, but it was the pause of a man who didn't know what he was supposed to say. He covered it quickly. I finished the sauce, rested the fish, plated with. Ethan lifted a hand. No, he said. That's what you think cooking sounds like. A few diners gasped quietly, like they'd witnessed a slap. Ethan continued, voice calm. The person who cooked this did something most chefs wouldn't. They killed the heat early to protect the emulsification. They used lemon zest, not lemon juice, because the sauce needed brightness without more acid. And they wiped the plate with the side of their thumb, fast, careful, because they've worked in kitchens where presentation wasn't vanity. It was survival. Silence. Sarah felt like her lungs had been stolen, because Ethan just described her. Not a chef. Her habits. Things she hadn't told a soul. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Ethan wasn't identifying skill. He was identifying identity. Leroux's voice cracked. Stop it, he said. Stop pushing her. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Why? Because you're protecting her, he asked. Or because you're protecting yourself? Leroux flinched. Gustav looked between them, confused and furious. What is going on? Ethan didn't answer him. He stood up, slow and deliberate. The room watched him rise as if standing itself was an act of violence. He walked around the table, closing the distance between himself and Sarah. Sarah's body reacted before her brain could. Her shoulders tightened. Her feet wanted to step back. Ethan stopped at a respectful distance. Then he lowered his voice so only she could clearly hear. You don't remember me, he said. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Ethan continued, You should, because you fed me the best meal of my life, the night before everything burned. The words hit her like a punch. The night before everything burned. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah's mind snapped back to that night, her father's restaurant packed, laughter, heat, pride. Then smoke, sirens, screaming. She stared at Ethan, searching his face for a lie. But his eyes held something steady. Pain? Gratitude? Guilt? Sarah's lips parted, but no sound came out. Ethan's voice softened. I was 17. I was nobody then. Not a billionaire. Not feared. Just hungry. He paused. You gave me food when you didn't have to. And you said something to me I never forgot. Sarah's throat tightened. She whispered, What did I say? Ethan's gaze didn't waver. You said, people don't become monsters overnight. They become monsters when nobody feeds them anything real. Sarah's breath caught, because those were her words. Micro cliffhanger. The truth landed. Ethan hadn't just eaten her food once. He'd carried her voice for years. Behind them, Leroux's face had gone pale. He looked like a man watching a locked door open. Gustav snapped, This is ridiculous. He stepped forward, pointing at Sarah like she was guilty simply for being noticed. She's manipulating you, Caldwell. She's a con artist. You're being played. Ethan turned slowly. Manipulating, he repeated. Then he did something that made the entire room stiffen. He smiled. Not warm. Not friendly. A smile like a trap closing. You want to talk about manipulation, chef? Ethan asked. Fine. Let's. He reached into his jacket again, but this time he didn't pull out a card. He pulled out a folded document. Then he placed it on the tablecloth, smoothing it flat with 2 fingers. Leroux's eyes darted to it and widened in terror. Gustave leaned forward to read, then froze, because at the top, in bold, it said, Fire Investigation Report, Lancaster Family Restaurant. The dining room murmured like a hive disturbed. Sarah's vision narrowed. The words blurred. She suddenly felt too hot, too cold, too exposed. Ethan looked at Gustave with surgical calm. I have the original report, he said. Not the version that hit the news. The original. Unedited. Leroux whispered, almost inaudible, No. Ethan's gaze flicked to Leroux. Oh yes, he said, and the report mentions something interesting. He tapped a line on the page. It mentions that the accelerant wasn't kitchen oil, Ethan said. It was a commercial solvent, something used by corporate cleaning contractors. Something a restaurant staff wouldn't have access to. Something only someone with building contracts would. Micro cliffhanger. The diners started whispering again. This wasn't food gossip anymore. This was a crime. Sarah's knees weakened. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. Ethan's voice remained calm. And it mentions a witness, he continued. A young dishwasher who saw a man in a suit leaving through the back alley, carrying a red canister. That witness later recanted. Leroux's face went gray. Gustave stammered, What are you implying? Ethan looked directly at Sarah now. I'm implying that you didn't burn your father's restaurant, he said. And the people who convinced the city you did are sitting in this room. A heavy silence fell, because suddenly, Lubley wasn't just pretentious. It was a crime scene with chandeliers. Sarah's mouth opened. Her voice came out as a whisper. Why are you doing this? Ethan's eyes softened for half a heartbeat, then hardened again. Because someone asked me to, he said. And because I'm tired of watching talent get buried by money. Leroux's voice rose, panicked. You can't do this here. Not in front of them. Ethan's gaze snapped to him. Not again, he repeated. That's what you said. So tell me, Leroux, how many times have you done this? How many chefs have you erased? How many lives have you burned down to make room for your empire? Leroux took a step back. Gustave lunged forward, furious. This is slander. And that's when Ethan did the last thing Sarah expected. He turned to the room, projecting just enough for everyone to hear, and said, I'm not here to shame a restaurant. I'm here to recruit a chef. A wave of whispers. Ethan looked back at Sarah. And if she refuses, he said calmly, then I'll release everything I have, including the names. Sarah's stomach dropped, because now she understood the trap. Ethan wasn't just offering help. He was forcing a decision publicly. Step forward and reclaim her identity, or stay hidden and let the truth explode anyway. What would you choose when the truth can save you and destroy you at the same time? And why did Leroux look like he was about to do something desperate to stop Sarah from being seen? The owner's fear didn't look like guilt anymore. It looked like a calculation. Leroux scanned the dining room the way a man scans exits during a fire. He wasn't thinking about reputation. He was thinking about control. About what he could still keep if everything started collapsing. Sarah felt it in the air, the moment right before a rich man stops playing nice. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the danger wasn't Ethan exposing the truth. The danger was what powerful people do when exposure becomes inevitable. Gustave still stood rigid beside Ethan's table, eyes flicking between the report and Sarah like he couldn't decide which one he hated more. His pride had cracked, and under it, there was something uglier than arrogance. Terror. Because if Sarah was truly Sarah Lancaster, then Gustave's entire genius chef persona was a costume. And if Ethan had evidence of framing, then Gustave's connection to the restaurant group, his safety net, might not save him. Leroux spoke first, voice strained but polished. Mr. Caldwell, he said, forcing a smile, we can discuss this privately. There's no need to. Ethan cut him off. There's every need, he said calmly, because you built your empire in private. A few diners whispered, phones hidden under napkins now. Someone at the bar slid their stool closer. Sarah felt exposed in a way that was almost physical. She wanted to disappear again, to step backward into the kitchen and let this fight happen without her. But Ethan kept glancing at her like she was the center of the story, not a side character. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah understood she wasn't being invited into this. She was being drafted. Ethan turned to the manager, the one who had been sweating since the first bite. "Bring me a clean station," he said. "A cutting board, a knife, salt, butter, lemon, shallots, white wine, and a pan." The manager blinked. "Sir, in the dining room?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Right here." A ripple of shock moved through the guests. Lubley wasn't the kind of place where cooking happened in public. It was the kind of place where food arrived like magic and the labor remained invisible. Ethan was about to break that illusion on purpose. Leroux shook his head, low and furious. "You can't turn my dining room into a circus." Ethan's eyes stayed calm. "Then stop running a circus behind closed doors." Micro cliffhanger. Leroux's jaw tightened, because Ethan wasn't just threatening him with information. Ethan was threatening him with visibility. The manager rushed off, and within moments, staff began to set up a small portable station near Ethan's table. Silverware moved. A rolling cart appeared. A pan gleamed under the chandelier light like it didn't belong there. Sarah stared at it, confused. "What are you doing?" she whispered to Ethan. Ethan's voice was quiet, meant for her. "I'm giving you a doorway," he said. "Walk through it, or let them lock it forever." Sarah swallowed. "A doorway to what?" "To the truth," Ethan said. "The kind that can't be argued with." Gustav scoffed. "This is insane," he spat. "You're going to make a waitress cook to prove something? She can't." Ethan's eyes flicked to him. "She can," he said. 2 words. Absolute. Then Ethan looked at Sarah's hands again, and Sarah hated that her hands were betraying her, trembling slightly, not from fear of cooking, but from fear of being seen cooking. Because cooking wasn't just a skill to her. It was an identity. It was family. It was the thing she lost when her father's restaurant burned. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the fire didn't just take a building. It took the part of her that believed she deserved to exist. The manager returned with ingredients, and Ethan arranged them with calm precision, like a man who'd done this before. The crowd watched, fascinated. Ethan held up a small bowl of sauce, Gustav's sauce, like evidence. "This," he said, "is what happens when someone imitates greatness." Then he placed it down and looked at Sarah. "And this," he said, tapping the clean pan, "is where greatness shows itself." Leroux stepped forward, voice hard. "No," he said. "She's not cooking in my restaurant." Ethan didn't look at him. "You don't get to decide what happens to her," he said. Leroux's face twisted. "I own this place." Ethan's gaze snapped up. "And that's your problem," he said. "You think ownership means authority over people." Micro cliffhanger. Leroux's control was slipping, and rich men don't lose control quietly. Leroux leaned toward Sarah, lowering his voice in a way that felt like a threat wrapped in politeness. "Sarah," he said, "whatever you think you remember, you don't want this. People will drag your name through the streets again. They'll call you an arsonist again. They'll destroy you again. Again." Sarah's stomach clenched. Ethan watched Leroux with eyes like a blade. "You keep saying again," he said softly, "as if you're proud of how well it worked the first time." Leroux's eyes flashed. "You don't know what you're talking about." Ethan nodded once, as if acknowledging the lie. Then he did something startling. He placed the knife handle toward Sarah. An invitation. A dare. A rescue. Sarah stared at the knife. Her fingers hovered over it. The room held its breath. Micro cliffhanger. The knife wasn't just a tool. If she picked it up, she'd be declaring war on the people who buried her. Gustav laughed, sharp and mean. "Go on," he said loudly to embarrass her. "Pick it up. Show everyone your little fantasy." Sarah's cheeks burned. Her mouth tasted metallic. Ethan's voice was low. "Ignore him," he said. "He's afraid." Gustav's face twisted. "I'm not afraid of a waitress." Ethan's eyes didn't move. "No," he said. "You're afraid of being revealed as a fraud." The diners murmured. The word fraud was delicious to them. Rich people love scandals as long as they're not about themselves. Sarah's fingers finally closed around the knife. The moment steel touched her skin, something in her posture shifted. It was subtle but real. Her shoulders settled. Her grip became sure. Her breathing slowed. Micro cliffhanger. The room saw it too, the instant she stopped looking like a waitress and started looking like a chef. Ethan slid the pan toward her. "Make the sauce you would have served," he said. "The one you tasted in your head." Sarah's lips parted. "Here? In front of them?" Ethan nodded once. "Yes," he said, "because the truth needs witnesses." Sarah looked out at the dining room, faces hungry for drama, phones recording, eyes judging. Then she looked at Leroux and Gustave, two men who represented everything that had stolen her life. And then Sarah began. She diced shallots with speed that didn't belong to a server. The knife moved like it had been waiting years to be used again. Clean cuts, uniform pieces, not showy, efficient, purposeful, gasps, whispers, micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized she wasn't just cooking. She was resurrecting a version of herself everyone tried to kill. She set the pan on heat. The butter melted. Shallots hit the fat with a soft sizzle. The sound carried through the silent dining room like a confession. Ethan watched closely, not interfering. He wasn't testing her skills like a judge. He was watching her like someone watching proof of life. Sarah added wine, letting it reduce. She controlled the flame like she was controlling time. She stirred with calm hands now, steady, practiced, certain. Gustave's face began to change. The smugness drained. His eyes narrowed, then widened. Recognition crept in, not of Sarah's identity, but of her level. Because this wasn't a waitress showing off. This was a professional. Leroux took a step back, lips parting. "No," he whispered again, like the word was prayer. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah noticed Leroux wasn't just afraid. He looked like he was watching a ghost walk back into his life. Sarah killed the heat early, just as Ethan described. She whisked in butter slowly, protecting the emulsion. She added lemon zest, bright, controlled, not acidic. The sauce turned glossy, alive. The dining room couldn't look away. Ethan finally spoke to the room. "Notice," he said, "how she doesn't rush to impress you. She cooks like someone who's cooked for people she loves." Sarah's throat tightened, but her hands didn't shake. She finished the sauce and slid it toward Ethan. Ethan dipped the tip of his spoon into it. The entire restaurant held its breath again. He tasted it. 1 second. 2. Then Ethan closed his eyes. And when he opened them, something had changed in his face. Something like grief, like relief, like vindication. Micro cliffhanger. The room realized they weren't watching a food critique anymore. They were watching a reckoning. Ethan set the spoon down gently. "That," he said quietly, "is Sarah Lancaster." A wave of whispers crashed through the dining room. Gustave's face went white. Leroux's expression turned frantic, and Sarah saw it, the split-second decision forming behind his eyes. He turned sharply, signaling someone across the room, security. 2 large men near the entrance began moving. Ethan noticed instantly. His gaze snapped toward them, then back to Leroux. "Don't," Ethan warned, voice still calm, but now edged with something dangerous. Leroux's voice shook with rage. "Get her out," he hissed. "Now." Sarah's blood went cold, because she understood the plan. Remove her before she can speak, before she can be heard, before the truth becomes permanent. Ethan stepped between Sarah and the approaching security, posture relaxed but unmistakably protective. And then, in a voice loud enough for the whole dining room to hear, Ethan said, "If you touch her, I will release the full report tonight. Names, contracts, recordings, everything." Leroux froze, but the security kept moving because someone else, someone higher, had already given the order. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized Leroux wasn't the top of this chain. Micro cliffhanger. If Leroux was this scared, who was he really protecting? If you want to see how far this goes, and who steps out of the shadows when a billionaire threatens an empire, subscribe, because the next moment turns Lovely into a battlefield. Sarah backed up instinctively. The knife was still in her hand, not as a weapon, as a reminder that she could fight. Security closed in. Gustave's lips curled into a small, vicious smile, because if Sarah got dragged out, the story could be rewritten again. Ethan's eyes stayed locked on Leroux. "Last chance," he said. Leroux's mouth opened, then shut. His face twisted, trapped. And from the back of the room, a new voice spoke, smooth, amused, and terrifyingly familiar. "Ethan, you always did love dramatic meals." Every head turned. Sarah's stomach dropped, because she recognized that voice too, one she hadn't heard since the fire, but had heard in nightmares ever since. So who just walked into Lovely smiling like they owned the past, and why did Ethan's hand tighten into a fist like he'd been waiting for this exact enemy to show up? The voice from the back of a room didn't belong to Lovely. It was too comfortable, too amused, too sure of itself. "Ethan, you always did love dramatic meals." Every head turned as if pulled by a single string. The chandeliers glittered above, indifferent to the shift happening beneath them. The dining room that had just been a stage now felt like a courtroom waiting for the judge to arrive. Sarah's stomach dropped, because she knew that voice. Not from television, not from society pages, not from rumors. From memory, raw, personal, burned into her. A man stepped forward from the shadowy edge of the dining room with an easy smile and the kind of posture money buys. Salt and pepper hair. A tailored suit that looked like it was sewn onto him. A face that had practiced warmth so often it almost seemed real. Almost. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized her nightmares hadn't been exaggerating. This man wasn't just part of the past. He was the past walking in like he still owned her. Leroux's face changed instantly. Relief and panic collided behind his eyes. He straightened like a subordinate caught slouching. "Mr. Vale," he said, voice suddenly respectful. "Mr. Vale." The name rippled through the room like a secret being spoken too loudly. A few diners exchanged quick glances. Some recognized it. Some didn't. But the ones who did sat up straighter. Gustav's expression snapped into something like desperate hope. If Leroux was scared of this man, then maybe Gustav could hide behind him. Ethan didn't move. But Sarah saw Ethan's right hand tighten, fingers curling once, controlled but not calm. Micro cliffhanger, a billionaire who never flinched had just reacted like a man seeing an old enemy. "Adrian Vale," Ethan said, voice flat. The man smiled wider. "Still sharp," Vale replied, strolling forward like he was greeting friends at a fundraiser. "I heard you were sniffing around my little corner of the city again. I didn't realize you'd do it in public." Vale's eyes swept the room, then landed on Sarah. And there it was. A pause that lasted half a second too long. A recognition he tried to hide with charm. A predator confirming prey. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah understood, with sick clarity, that Vale didn't just recognize her. He'd been waiting for her to resurface. "Well, well," Vale said softly, as if savoring the moment. "Sarah Lancaster, the ghost chef." Sarah's throat tightened. She felt eyes slam into her from every direction. Her name, her real name, hit the dining room like a thrown glass. Gustav's head whipped toward her. His mouth opened, then closed. His face was drained of color. Leroux whispered, "Please don't." Not to Ethan. To Vale. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Leroux wasn't terrified of Ethan's evidence. He was terrified of Vale's temper. Ethan's voice stayed even. "You just admitted you know her," he said. "Interesting." Vale chuckled as if Ethan had said something adorable. "Of course I know her," he replied. "Everyone knew her once. A prodigy. A rising star. A father-daughter kitchen that made people cry into their plates." He sighed theatrically. Such a tragedy. A fire. A scandal. A career gone. Sarah's hands trembled. She hated that they trembled. She wanted steel in her bones, not fear. Ethan stepped slightly closer to Sarah, not touching her, but positioning himself between her and Vale's gaze. Micro cliffhanger. Ethan wasn't just exposing the truth anymore. He was shielding it. Vale's eyes narrowed at the movement, mused. "Oh," he said, "you're protecting her now. That's sweet, Ethan. I didn't know you collected broken things." Sarah's jaw clenched. Broken things. That's what they called people like her. People who fell. People who got blamed. People who didn't have enough power to rewrite the story. Ethan didn't take the bait. He gestured to the pan and the glossy sauce Sarah had made. "She cooked," he said, "in front of witnesses. No one can deny what she is." Vale glanced at the sauce with lazy interest, like it was a painting he might buy and hang in a hallway. "Talent," he said. "I never denied she had talent." Then his eyes returned to Sarah, and his smile sharpened. "I denied she had permission." Micro cliffhanger. Permission. The word landed like a collar clicking into place. The room went cold. Even the diners who had been excited, hungry for drama, now looked uneasy. Because permission sounded like ownership, and ownership sounded ugly when spoken out loud. Sarah's voice came out before she could stop it. What do you want? Vale's smile softened, practiced. Want, he repeated. Nothing, dear. I already got what I wanted. Sarah's blood ran colder. Because she heard it, certainty. A man who believed the past was already settled. Ethan's eyes narrowed. That's a lie, he said. And you know it. Vali shujijid. Call it what you like, he replied. But here's the truth, since we're doing public confessions. He turned slightly, addressing the room like he was giving a toast. Restaurants don't succeed on talent alone. They succeed in control. Contracts. Supply chains. Real estate. Reputation. He looked at Sarah again. And reputation, he said softly, is the easiest thing to set on fire. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah felt the sentence hit her like smoke because he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing what he did. Ethan's hand moved to the folded report on the table. You're proud, Ethan said. Vali's milid. I'm honest, he replied. Sarah's chest tightened. You framed me, she whispered. Vale's expression didn't change. Not guilt. No shame. Only mild curiosity, like she'd asked an obvious question. I didn't frame you, Vale said. I gave the city a story it would enjoy. He tilted his head. And you helped whether you meant to or not. You were ambitious. You were young. You were visible. That's the kind of person the world loves to punish. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized he wasn't defending himself. He was explaining why she deserved it. Gustav, desperate to align with power, forced a laugh. Exactly, he said, gesturing at Sarah. She's in trouble. Always has been. Vale didn't even look at Gustav. That dismissal was worse than an insult. It told everyone in the room that Gustav was nothing more than a tool. Leroux swallowed, voice cracking. Mr. Vale, we can handle this quietly. Vale finally looked at Leroux. His smile vanished. Quietly. Vale repeated, tone polite but lethal. You let Ethan Caldwell walk into my restaurant, put up a cooking station, and resurrect a scandal on camera, and you want to handle it quietly. Leroux visibly shrank. Micro cliffhanger. The owner of Lovely was not the owner of this situation. Vale's gaze returned to Ethan. So, he said smoothly, what are you doing, Ethan? Blackmail? Heroism? A recruitment pitch? Ethan's voice was calm, but there was something beneath it now. Old anger, old regret. She belongs in a kitchen, Ethan said, not hiding in your shadow. Vali shukled. Belongs, he repeated. That's a cute word. Tell me, does she belong in a kitchen that pays her? Or a kitchen that owns her? Sarah flinched at the phrasing. Ethan didn't. I'm offering her a choice, he said. Vale's eyes sharpened. No, he replied. You're offering her a fantasy. He turned to Sarah with sudden softness. Sarah, darling, you want to know the truth? The city didn't blacklist you because they believed the rumors. Sarah swallowed. Vale continued, voice gentle as poison. They blacklisted you because even if you were innocent, you were inconvenient. You threatened the hierarchy. You made powerful men look small. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized that even innocence wouldn't have saved her. Only power would have. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's exactly why this ends now. Vale sighed like Ethan was being dramatic. Then end it, he said, spreading his hands. Say her name. Release your report. Burn my reputation. He leaned closer, smile returning, and watch what happens to her next. Sarah's heart slammed, because Vale was right about one thing. Even if the truth came out, the city could still choose to hate her. The internet could still choose a villain. Sponsors could still avoid her. Restaurants could still fear her. The world loved a scandal more than it loved redemption. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the truth wasn't a shield, it was a spotlight, and spotlights burn. Ethan looked at Sarah now, voice softer. He's trying to scare you, Ethan said, because you terrify him. Sarah let out a shaky breath. I don't even know why, she whispered. Vale answered before Ethan could. Because you're proof, he said simply. Proof that talent exists without permission. Then Vale's gaze flicked to the security guards still hovering, uncertain. Gentlemen, he said, smooth again, escort Ms. Lancaster out. She's causing a disturbance. Sarah's body stiffened. Ethan's voice cut through. Touch her, and the report goes live, he warned. Vali's milid. Then publish it, he said. But ask yourself, Ethan, are you willing to start a war you can't finish? Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized this wasn't just about her past anymore. It was about Ethan's limits. Ethan took a slow breath. I already started it, he said. Vale's eyes gleamed. Good, he replied. Because I've been bored. He turned to Sarah, voice low enough that only she could truly hear, though the room sensed the shift. You want your life back? Vale murmured. Come with me. Quietly. I'll give you a kitchen. A budget. A title. Everything they took. Sarah stared at him, horrified. Why? She whispered. Vale's smile deepened. Because it will prove something, he said. That even the strongest talent eventually comes home when the world makes it hungry enough. Sarah's hands clenched around the edge of the table. She felt trapped between two monsters, one offering rescue with strings, one offering truth with fire. If you were Sarah, would you take Vale's offer to regain a kitchen instantly, knowing it comes with a leash, or would you stand with Ethan and risk being burned by the spotlight again? Tell me in the comments, which choice would you make and why? Sarah looked at Ethan. Ethan's eyes held steady. Don't believe him, Ethan said softly. He doesn't give. He collects. Vale smiled like he'd already won. Then he said the final line that made Sarah's blood freeze. Sarah, your father didn't die in that fire by accident. Sarah's vision narrowed. Her ears rang. Her father dead? She'd been told it was smoke inhalation, a tragic chain of events. A horrible accident. Something nobody could control. Vale's smile stayed calm. Ethan's face changed, just slightly, but enough for Sarah to see. He knew this was coming. So what did Vale mean by not an accident, and how much of Sarah's life had been engineered long before the flames ever started? Sarah couldn't hear the dining room anymore. Not the whispers. Not the soft clink of glasses. Not even the frantic breathing of Leroux as he hovered on the edge of collapse. All she could hear was Vale's sentence echoing in her skull like a siren. Your father didn't die in that fire by accident. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the worst part wasn't the possibility. It was how casually Vale said it, like it was common knowledge. Her throat tightened until it felt like she was swallowing ash. She gripped the table, knuckles white, trying to anchor herself in the present. Ethan stepped closer. Sarah, he said softly. Stay with me. Vales milid, pleazid. Oh, look at that, he murmured. You do care. Ethan didn't look at him. His eyes were on Sarah, steady as a handrail over a cliff. He's baiting you, Ethan said. Don't let him steer you with grief. Sarah's voice finally came out thin. Did you know? She asked Ethan. Did you know he was going to say that? Ethan hesitated, only a fraction. That fraction was enough. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah understood that Ethan had withheld something, and withheld it on purpose. Vale's smile widened. Answer her, he said, delighted. This is my favorite part. When heroes have to confess they're not clean. Ethan's jaw tightened. I knew there were irregularities, he admitted. I didn't know exactly what happened to your father. Not until recently. Sarah's chest tightened further. Recently. That meant Ethan had been digging. That meant this dinner wasn't spontaneous. That meant Ethan had built this moment. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized she wasn't only being rescued, she was being used as the key to unlock something bigger. Vale clapped slowly once, twice, the sound mocking in the dead silence. Bravo, he said. So righteous. So be careful with your words. He turned to the diners with a friendly smile. I apologize for the disruption, he said, as if he were the host of the evening. You're witnessing an old misunderstanding. Ethan loves to dramatize business disputes into moral crusades. Business disputes. Sarah's stomach lurched. Her father's death was reduced to a dispute. Ethan finally looked at Vale, eyes hard. If you are so confident, Ethan said, say it clearly. What are you claiming? Vale stepped closer, just enough that Sarah could smell his cologne. Expensive, sharp, too clean. I'm claiming, Vale said softly, that accidents are rarely accidental when property is involved. Sarah's breath hitched. Vale continued, voice silky. Your father didn't want to sell. He didn't want a franchise. He didn't want to become a brand in my portfolio. He shrugged lightly. So the restaurant became available. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the restaurant wasn't a victim of fire. It was a victim of negotiation. Leroux's face went ashen. Gustav looked like he might vomit. The manager hovered near the wall, eyes darting like he wished he could vanish. Sarah's voice shook with rage now. "You killed him," she whispered. Vale's expression softened into something almost paternal. "No," he said. "I removed an obstacle. There's a difference." Sarah's body went cold, then hot, then cold again. She wanted to scream, to lunge, to smash the pan into his smug face. But Ethan's hand lifted slightly, subtle, calming, like he was reminding her, don't give Vale the scene he wants. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Vale wasn't afraid of her anger. He was counting on it. Vale looked at Ethan again. "Now," he said, "let's be practical. You brought the report. You staged the little cooking demo. You want the city to fall in love with the secret chef you found hiding as a waitress." He glanced at Sarah's uniform, eyes amused. "You want to turn her into a redemption story," Vale said. "A viral miracle." Ethan didn't deny it. "She deserves the truth." Vali nodded doubtfully. "Maybe." Then he leaned in, voice lowering. "But here's the part you can't control, Ethan. She's still hungry." Sarah stiffened. Vale's eyes pinned her. "Hungry for a kitchen," he whispered. "Hungry for respect. Hungry for proof that she didn't waste her life. And you're offering her what? A fight? A headline? A war?" He smiled. "I'm offering her certainty." Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Vale's offer wasn't kindness. It was a shortcut designed to trap desperate people. Ethan's voice sharpened. "You're offering her a cage." "Vali shuzhizhid. Cages come with food," he replied. "Freedom comes with starvation." The words landed in Sarah's chest because they weren't entirely wrong. She'd been surviving on scraps, literal and emotional, for years. She'd been invisible, underpaid, humiliated, exhausted, alone. And now 2 powerful men were arguing over her future like she was a prize. Sarah's hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury at being treated like property again. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the real battle wasn't Ethan versus Vale. It was Sarah versus the version of herself that still believed she needed permission. Ethan turned slightly toward her, voice low. "Sarah, you don't have to answer him," he said. "Not tonight." Vali smiled. "Oh, she does," he said, "because I'm not leaving without something." He gestured subtly, and the security guards moved again, not rushing, but closing in, forming a soft wall around Sarah's space. Ethan's shoulders squared. Leroux finally broke, voice cracking. "Please," he whispered to Vale. "This is out of control." Vale didn't even glance at him. "Then regain control," Vale said, as if ordering a waiter to refill water. Micro cliffhanger. Leroux wasn't an owner. He was a servant wearing an owner's suit. Sarah looked around the dining room. Some diners looked thrilled. Some looked disturbed. Most looked hungry for a story. She realized something terrible. Even if she screamed, half of them would treat it like entertainment. Ethan stepped forward, voice calm but louder now, commanding the room. "Everyone is recording," he said. "Keep recording." Vale's eyes narrowed. "Careful," he warned. "You're not as untouchable as you think." Ethan didn't blink. "And you're not as invisible as you think," he replied. Micro cliffhanger. For the first time, Vale looked slightly annoyed because Ethan was turning witnesses into weapons. Ethan pointed to the report. "That document is one piece," he said, "but it's not the only piece." Vale's smile returned. "Of course it is," he said. "You wouldn't have invited me into a room full of cameras if you didn't have something else." Ethan's gaze hardened. "You're right," he said. Sarah's heart slammed. Because Ethan's tone changed, less like a critic, more like a man ready to reveal a trap. Ethan looked at Sarah. "I didn't just come here to expose what they did to you," he said quietly. "I came here to give you leverage." Sarah swallowed. "What leverage?" Ethan's eyes flicked toward Vale. "The kind he can't buy," Ethan said. Then Ethan reached into his jacket again, slow, deliberate, and pulled out a second item. Not paper. A small silver key. He held it up between 2 fingers. Micro cliffhanger. The key looked ordinary, but Ethan held it like it could collapse empires. Vale's smile faltered for the first time. "Not much. Just enough." "What is that?" Sarah whispered. Ethan's voice stayed low. "A storage unit," he said. "In Queens. Paid under a shell company your friend Leroux used." He nodded toward the owner. Leroux's face crumpled. Ethan continued, inside is a safe. Inside the safe are backups. He looked at Vale. Contracts, emails, signed agreements, and, most importantly, footage. The dining room collectively leaned in. Vale's jaw tightened slightly. Footage of what? Ethan's eyes didn't waver. Of the alley behind your father's restaurant, he said to Sarah, voice gentler. The night of the fire. Sarah's body went rigid. Footage. There had been no footage. She'd been told the cameras didn't work. She'd been told the alley was dark. She'd been told there were no clear faces. She'd been told a lot of things. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized her entire truth had been curated. Vale's voice turned dangerously soft. Ethan, he said, you don't want to play this game. Ethan nodded once. I already am. Vale looked at Sarah now, a smile forced back onto his face like a mask. Sweetheart, he said, listen to me. Whatever he's offering you, whatever evidence he claims, comes with chaos. He leaned in, voice dripping with false care. Come with me tonight. Quietly. I'll sign over a kitchen. A real one. Your name on the door. No more uniforms. No more scrubbing floors. You can be a chef again tomorrow morning. Sarah's heart pounded. It was exactly what she wanted, and exactly what would destroy her. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized temptation isn't always a stranger. It's the thing you've begged for in the dark. Ethan spoke steady. He'll own you, he said. He'll make you the face of his forgiveness. A trophy redemption story he controls. Vale's eyes flashed. And you, he said to Ethan, will make her a martyr for your crusade. The room buzzed. Dinesh whispered up. Phones recorded. Sarah felt like she was standing on a knife's edge, and both sides were sharp. Then she did the only thing that felt real. She asked Vale, voice shaking but clear, if you didn't kill my father by accident, why tell me now? Val smiled. Because you're old enough to understand, he said. Because you're standing in front of cameras and you can't hurt me. He tilted his head. And because I want you to remember who decides what happens to your life. Sarah's blood ran cold. Micro cliffhanger. Vale wasn't confessing because he was careless. He was confessing because he believed he was untouchable. Ethan leaned toward Sarah, voice low. You don't have to choose him or me, he said. Choose yourself. But whatever you do, don't go alone with him. Vali shukled. She won't be alone, he said. She'll be with her future. Then he glanced at the security guards again. Time, he said simply. The guards moved closer. Sarah's instinct screamed. Run. Fight. Scream. But the room was packed, exits blocked, and Vale's confidence told her he'd planned every angle. Ethan stepped in front of her fully now. Back off, he said, voice calm but unmistakably dangerous. Vale's eyes narrowed. You're going to put hands on my men in public, he asked. In front of your precious witnesses. Ethan didn't blink. I'm going to do whatever keeps her alive, he said. Alive. The word hit Sarah hard, because if Ethan was thinking in terms of being alive, then the threat was bigger than humiliation. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized this wasn't about reputation anymore. This was about safety. Vale sighed as if disappointed. Fine, he said. I'll make it simple. He looked at Sarah. You have 2 minutes, he said softly. Come with me and you get a kitchen and silence. Stay with Ethan and you get truth and war. Sarah's throat tightened. 2 minutes. A timer on her life. If this choice feels impossible, subscribe, because what Sarah does next flips the power dynamic so violently that even Ethan Caldwell doesn't see it coming. Sarah looked down at her hands, the same hands everyone had ignored until tonight. The hands that had once fed a room. The hands that had been blamed for fire. The hands now hold the proof of who she truly was. Then Sarah lifted her gaze. And instead of choosing Ethan or Vale, she made a third move. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. Ethan frowned. Sarah. She raised a finger to him. Not disrespectful. A request. Trust me. Then she tapped the screen and put on speaker. A dial tone filled the dining room. Vale's smile faltered again. Who are you calling? Sarah's voice was steady now, cold as steel. Someone you forgot, she said. The line clicked. A voice answered, old, rough, unmistakably shaken. Hello. Sarah swallowed once. Chef Marcos, she said. Vale's eyes widened. Micro cliffhanger. Ethan's gaze snapped to Vale, because Vale's reaction was the reaction of a man hearing a ghost answer the phone. Sarah's voice shook with controlled fury. "Tell them," she said. "Tell them what you saw the night my father died." The dining room went dead silent again. Even Ethan looked stunned. Vale's smile vanished completely. And on the speaker, the old man's breathing turned ragged, as if he'd been waiting years for this call, and feared it at the same time. So what is Chef Marcos about to confess in front of an entire room of witnesses? And why does Vale suddenly look like the fire is finally reaching him? The entire restaurant seemed to forget how to breathe. Sarah stood with her phone held out like a match over gasoline, the speaker hissing softly with the sound of an old man's ragged inhale. The chandeliers above didn't flicker, but the room felt like it did, like luxury itself was suddenly unstable. On the other end of the line, Chef Marcos didn't speak. He just breathed, and that was somehow worse. Micro cliffhanger. Silence from a witness isn't empty. It's the moment a truth decides whether it wants to survive. "Chef Marcos," Sarah said again, voice steady only because she refused to let it break. "It's me." "Sarah." A faint sound, like fabric shifting, came through the speaker. Then the man's voice, older than she remembered, scraped across the room. "Sarah," he whispered, as if saying her name out loud could summon the fire back into his lungs. Yes, her name. Not Miller. Not the fake identity she wore like armor. Her real name, spoken into a room full of strangers who were suddenly starving for more than food. Vale's face stayed carefully neutral, but his eyes were sharp now, calculating. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was listening. Ethan didn't move. He stood slightly in front of Sarah, body angled like a shield. But his eyes were locked on the phone, jaw tight, as if he was bracing for impact. Leroux looked like he might faint. Gustav looked like he might explode. Micro cliffhanger. When the rich stop smirking and start panicking, it means the truth is finally in the building. Sarah swallowed. "Tell them," she said. "Tell them what you saw that night. The alley. The red can. The suit." The dining room held its breath again, the way it had when Ethan tasted the sauce, only now the stakes were flesh and history, not flavor. On speaker, Marcos exhaled slowly. "You shouldn't be calling me," he said, voice trembling. "You don't understand what you're doing." Sarah's fingers tightened around the phone. "I understand exactly what I'm doing," she said. "I'm done being quiet." A ripple moved through the diners. Phone shifted. A woman near the bar leaned forward, so hard she nearly toppled off her stool. Vale chuckled softly, the sound polite and cruel. "Chef Marcos," he called out, voice smooth as satin. "What a surprise. I assumed you were still enjoying your retirement." The old man's breathing stuttered on the line. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah heard it, the involuntary fear response of someone who had been threatened into silence for years. Marcos didn't answer Vale directly. Instead, he spoke to Sarah, as if trying to protect her through the phone. "You need to hang up," he whispered. "They'll come for you." Sarah's voice dropped cold. "They already have," she said. "Look where I am." A beat. Then Marcos's voice changed, still afraid, but edged with something else now. Shame. Anger. A lifetime of swallowing words. "I saw him," Marcos said. The room tightened. Vale's eyes narrowed. Ethan's chin lifted slightly, like a man hearing the first note of a song he's waited years to play. Marcos continued, voice rough. "I was taking out trash. Back door. The alley was dark, but not that dark. There were security lights. The cameras," he swallowed audibly. "The cameras worked that night, Sarah. They worked fine." Sarah's stomach lurched. Micro cliffhanger. The lie she'd been handed for years. The cameras didn't work, just died on speakerphone. A diner gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Marcos's voice shook. "I saw a man in a suit. Not staff. Not a cook. Suit. Clean shoes." He paused, breath ragged. He was carrying a red can. Not gasoline. Something stronger. It stung my nose from 10 feet away. Sarah's eyes burned. "Did you see his face?" A long pause. Vale's lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan's gaze didn't move, but his shoulders were coiled now, ready. Marcos whispered, "I saw enough." Sarah's heart hammered. "Say it," she demanded louder now. "Say who?" The dining room was so silent that the speaker's faint static sounded like rain. Marcos's voice finally came, cracked and trembling. It was Adrian Vale. The name hit the room like a body hitting water. Micro cliffhanger. For half a second, no one reacted because their minds needed time to catch up to the sheer audacity of a public accusation. Then chaos tried to begin, whispers turning into murmurs, murmurs into shocked voices. But Ethan lifted his hand, calm, commanding, and the room instinctively quieted again because even the chaos respected him. Vale smiled faintly, as if amused by a child's tantrum. "That's adorable," he said. An old man with a guilty conscience telling ghost stories. But Vale's eyes were not amused. They were furious. Leroux looked like his spine had vanished. He stared at Vale as if seeing him for the first time, an idol turning into a monster. Gustav stepped forward, voice sharp. "This is a lie," he barked. "You can't." Ethan cut him off. "Sit down," he said. Gustav froze mid-step. His face twisted, but he obeyed, because Ethan's authority in that moment felt bigger than Gustav's ego. Micro cliffhanger. Gustav had always thought power was loud, until he met power that didn't need to shout. Sarah's hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the phone. She forced herself steady. "Marcos," she whispered, voice breaking despite her fight, "why didn't you tell anyone?" A choke sound came through. "Because they made me recant," Marcos admitted. "They said if I didn't, they'd ruin my family. They'd close every place that hired me. He stopped, breath hitching. They said your father would be blamed anyway, because people love blaming the young." Sarah's eyes filled. She hated that tears were coming. She hated that the room could see them. But she hated more that she'd been alone in this for years while other people carried the truth like a secret they were too afraid to hold. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the fire didn't just burn a restaurant, it burned an entire network of witnesses into silence. Vale stepped closer, voice still smooth, but sharper now. "Marcos," he said, "be careful. Defamation is expensive. And you sound very poor." Marcos's breathing turned ragged again. Ethan leaned down toward Sarah's phone, voice calm but deadly. "Chef Marcos," he said, "you're not alone tonight. Stay on the line." Vale's eyes flashed. "Ethan." Ethan ignored him. "Marcos, do you still have the text messages?" Ethan asked. "The ones they used to force you to recant." Marcos hesitated. I kept them," he whispered. In case one day." Sarah's throat tightened. "In case one day the world was ready to hear you." Ethan finished. Marcos exhaled. "Yes." Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Ethan hadn't just set a trap, he'd built a rescue plan for the witnesses too. Vale's smile returned, forced. "You think this is enough?" he asked, turning to the diners as if they were investors at a pitch meeting. "A phone call? A story? You'll ruin a man's reputation over a dramatic low performance." Ethan looked at him. "Not a performance," he said. "A record." Vale's eyes narrowed. "Record of what?" Ethan gestured subtly. Sarah hadn't noticed at first, but now she saw it. Ethan's assistant, standing near the back, held up a small device, a discreet audio recorder with a red light. And multiple diners had phones up. And the restaurant's own security cameras, yes, the ones that didn't work, were pointed directly at them. Micro cliffhanger. Vale realized too late that this room wasn't a stage. This room was evidence. Vale's voice stayed calm, but a vein jumped in his temple. "Leroux," he said softly. Leroux flinched like he'd been struck. "Yes, sir." Vale's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Turn off the cameras." Leroux swallowed hard. I can't. The system." Vale's eyes hardened. "Turn them off." Leroux took a step toward the back office like a man walking to his own execution. Sarah felt her stomach twist. "Ethan," she whispered, "if he turns them off." Ethan didn't look worried. "Let him try," he said. Micro cliffhanger. Ethan's calm felt like a warning that Vale couldn't see the full trap yet. Vale turned back to Sarah. "You're making a mistake," he said softly, almost kindly. "You think exposing me will heal you." Sarah's voice shook with anger. "It will stop you." Vale's smile sharpened. "No," he said. "It will make you famous for the worst night of your life." He leaned in. "And then you'll realize fame is just another kind of fire." Sarah's breath caught, because the way he said it, like he'd done it before, made her skin crawl. Then Vale's gaze flicked to the pan, the sauce, the knife. He smiled again, colder. "But maybe," he said, we can still make use of you. Ethan's posture shifted instantly. Don't. Vale ignored him. You cooked in front of witnesses, Vale said. You proved your talent. Great. Now let's monetize your resurrection. He turned to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just watched the rebirth of Sarah Lancaster. Imagine the book deal, the TV series, the branded restaurant. Sarah's stomach twisted. He was trying to turn her pain into a product. Micro cliffhanger. Vale wasn't losing. He was pivoting, trying to control the narrative even while accused. Sarah's voice rose, raw. I'm not your brand. Vale's eyes glittered. Everyone is someone's brand, he said. The only question is whether you get paid. Ethan stepped forward. Enough, he said. Vale's gaze snapped to Ethan. Or what? Vale asked. You'll release your report? Congratulations. I'll drown it in lawsuits. I'll buy silence. I'll drag this through court until she's 40 and still known only as the arson chef. Sarah flinched. Ethan's voice stayed calm. Then we won't use courts, he said. Vale blinked once. What? Ethan looked at Sarah. You still have your father's recipe book? He asked. Sarah's chest tightened. Yes, she whispered. Why? Ethan's eyes hardened. Because the fire wasn't just about property, he said. It was about something Vale couldn't buy. Vale's smile faltered. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized there was something more valuable than the building, something Vale had hunted. Ethan continued, your father had a signature dish, the one that made investors circle like sharks, the one Vale tried to acquire before the fire. Sarah's voice was barely audible. The black truffle consommé. Vale's expression tightened, just a flash. Ethan nodded. And only 2 people knew the full method, he said. Your father and you. Sarah's blood went cold again, because she suddenly understood. If Vale couldn't get the recipe through contracts, he might have tried to get it through destruction. Vale's smile returned, but it was thinner now. You're romanticizing soup, he said. Ethan leaned in, voice sharp. No, he said. Im naming motive. Sarah's phone crackled. Marcos whispered, Sarah, he asked your father for that recipe. Your father said no. They argued. I heard it. Sarah's vision blurred. Micro cliffhanger. The recipe wasn't just food, it was the spark. Vale's calm finally cracked. Enough, he snapped, his first true loss of composure. In that crack, Sarah saw something terrifying. Not a businessman, not a restaurateur, but a man who needed control like oxygen. And then Vale did something that made Ethan move. Vale reached for Sarah's phone. Fussed. A sudden grab to end the call. Sarah jerked back, but Vale's fingers grazed the device. And Ethan's hand shot out, catching Vale's wrist midair. The entire dining room gasped. Micro cliffhanger. Billionaires don't touch people in public unless they're ready for war. Ethan's grip was firm, controlled. Don't, he said softly. Vale's eyes burned with rage. Let go. Ethan didn't. The security guards took a step forward. Sarah felt trapped again, the air tightening. And then, from the back office area, a loud click sounded, followed by a soft electronic chime. The cameras went dark. Leroux had done it. The restaurant's recording system shut off. But Ethan's assistant still had the device. And the diners still had their phones. Vale smiled, relieved, confident again. Now, he said, we can stop pretending this is about justice. Ethan's eyes stayed locked on him. You just turned off your own alibi, Ethan said. Vale blinked. So what did Ethan mean by alibi, and what happens now that Vale has finally put his hands on Sarah in front of witnesses? The cameras going dark should have felt like defeat. For Sarah, it felt like the room was losing its oxygen. Because for one brief moment, she'd believed the evidence would protect her. That sunlight was stronger than money. But as the security feed died, she remembered a hard truth she'd lived once already. Power loves darkness. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the most dangerous moments aren't when everyone is watching. They're when the watchers are removed. Vale smiled, and the smile looked easier now, like he'd regained home field advantage. Ethan, he said, almost friendly, you see? We can be civilized. No more theatrics. Ethan didn't release Vale's wrist immediately. He held it a second longer than necessary, eyes fixed, sending a message without words. I'm not afraid of you. Then Ethan let go. Vale smoothed his cuff as if nothing had happened. Now, Vale said, let's talk like men who understand the world. Sarah's fingers tightened around her phone. Marcos was still on the line, breathing hard. She could hear panic in the old man's silence. Chef Marcos, Sarah whispered, stay with me. Marcos's voice came through, strained. They turned off the cameras. Sarah, you need to leave. Now. Ethan's assistant, still holding the recorder, shifted slightly, as if preparing to move. Vale noticed and smiled. Ah, he said, nodding at the device. A personal recorder. Goo. Ethan's voice stayed calm. It's enough, he said. Vale's eyes glittered. Enough for what? A lawsuit. He leaned in slightly. You think courts scare me? I fund courts. Micro cliffhanger. Vale wasn't denying the accusation anymore. He was declaring the system belongs to him. Sarah felt something inside her harden. For years, she'd been broken by the idea that she had no power, that the story was fixed, that the city had decided. But tonight, she was learning a new lesson. When you can't win their game, you change the board. Ethan spoke again, voice low. You turned off the cameras, he said to Vale, because you think you've removed witnesses. Valis milid. Haven't I? Ethan gestured toward the diners. Do you see them? He asked. They're still here. Phones. Eyes. Memory. Vali shuklad. Memory can be bought, he said. Phones can be confiscated. At that, the security guard shifted again, subtle but threatening. Sarah's stomach tightened. And then Ethan said the line that made Vale's expression flicker. You just committed obstruction in front of 30 high-net-worth witnesses. Vale blinked once. Micro cliffhanger. For the first time, Vale hesitated, not because he feared truth, but because he feared consequences that money couldn't smooth fast enough. Ethan continued, voice calm. These people donate to campaigns. Sit on board. Fund charities. And now they watched you panic. He tilted his head. You think they'll forget what panic looks like? Vale's smile returned, but it was tighter. They'll forget if they're smart, he said. Sarah finally spoke loudly enough for the room. He's right, she said, voice shaking but clear. You're all witnesses. Heads turned toward her. Sarah's heart pounded. She hated public speaking. She hated attention, but she hated silence more. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized this was the exact moment her father would have stood taller, not because he was fearless, but because he refused to be erased. She lifted her phone. Chef Marcos is on the line, she said. He just named Adrian Vale as the man he saw with the accelerant. A wave of whispers surged. Vale's eyes narrowed. Hang up, he said softly. Sarah didn't. Vale's voice sharpened. Hang up, Sarah. Ethan's voice cut in. Don't talk to her like you own her. Vale's gaze snapped to Ethan. I don't own her, Vale said. I own the world that decides whether she eats. The cruelty of it made the room recoil. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah saw a few diners' faces change, because even rich people hate being reminded their comfort is built on someone else's fear. Ethan's assistant moved toward the exit, quiet, efficient, carrying the recorder like it was the only heartbeat that mattered. Vali nocised instantly. Stop him, Vale said. One of the security guards stepped in the assistant's path. Ethan shifted, blocking the guard with a single step. Touch him, Ethan said, voice calm, and I'll have your company investigated by morning. The guard hesitated. Vale's smile faded. You think you're still the richest person in every room, Vale said to Ethan. But not in mine. Ethan's voice didn't rise. Then let's see who owns the room when the police arrive, he said. Vale laughed, short, dismissive. Police. He tilted his head. Ethan, you're adorable. Micro cliffhanger. Vale's confidence wasn't bravado, it was experience. He'd survived the police before. Sarah's mind raced. Police would be slow. Courts are slower. Vale would chew through time like meat. She needed something immediate, something public, something irreversible. And then she remembered Ethan's earlier words, the truth needs witnesses. Witnesses weren't just cameras. Witnesses were people who can't unsee. Sarah turned toward the diners, voice rising. You all came here for dinner, she said. But you're watching a man confess that reputation can be set on fire. You're watching him threaten witnesses. You're watching him treat human lives like contracts. The diners shifted, uncomfortable. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized discomfort was a crack. If she pushed, the room could split. Vale stepped forward, voice gentle. "Sarah, don't," he said as if he cared. "You're emotional. You're overwhelmed. Let's step outside, get some air." Sarah shook her head. "No." Vale's eyes hardened. "You're going to embarrass yourself." Sarah's voice sharpened. "I've been embarrassed for 3 years," she snapped. "Tonight, it's your turn." A diner gasped softly. Ethan watched Sarah closely, something like pride behind his control. Vale's smile vanished. "Leroux," he said quietly, "get her removed." Leroux looked like a man drowning. "Mr. Vale, please." Vale's eyes cut to him. "Now." Leroux signaled security again. The guards stepped closer. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized violence didn't need punches to be violent. Being dragged out while your truth is mid-sentence is its own kind of attack. Ethan leaned toward Sarah, voice low. "I can get you out," he said, "but you have to move." Sarah shook her head. "If I run," she whispered back, "they'll say I ran because I'm guilty again." Ethan's jaw tightened. He understood. Sarah took a breath. Then she did something that made Ethan's eyes widen. She lifted the knife. Not toward anyone, upward, above shoulder level, visible to the room. The diners froze, half in fear, half in fascination. Sarah's voice rang out. "Everyone look," she said. "This is a chef's hand." She opened her left palm, turning it toward them. And there it was, the scar at the base of her thumb. Clean. Old. Real. Micro cliffhanger. The scar wasn't proof of innocence, but it was proof of identity, and identity was the first domino. Vale's eyes narrowed. Gustav stared as if he'd seen a ghost. Sarah continued, voice breaking but strong. "This scar is from my father's kitchen," she said. "Before the fire. Before the rumors. Before the people who wanted his restaurant decided they didn't want him alive." A stunned silence. Then a man at a nearby table, older, with a watch that screamed generational wealth, stood up slowly. "I ate at Lancaster's," he said, voice shaky. "I remember the soup." Sarah's chest tightened. Another diner stood. "I did too," a woman said. "It was unreal." Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the city hadn't forgotten her father. They'd just been told to. Vale's jaw tightened. He glanced around, reading the room. The witnesses were multiplying, and not just of the accusation, of the legacy. Ethan seized the moment. "Sarah," he said louder now, addressing the room, "tell them what Vale couldn't buy." Sarah swallowed hard. "My father's recipe book," she said. Vale's eyes sharpened. Ethan continued. He wanted the black truffle consommé method. He tried to acquire it, and when he couldn't. "Valis not paid. He burned down the restaurant," she said, "and they blamed me." The room erupted in whispers again, angrier this time, less entertained. Vale's voice dropped lethal. "You're going to regret this." Ethan stepped forward. "No," he said. "You are." Vale's eyes locked on Ethan. "You think you have leverage," Vale said softly. "You think you're clever." He smiled again, colder. "But you forgot something." Ethan didn't blink. "What?" Vale's gaze flicked to Sarah. "She's still on my property," Vale said. "And property disputes can get messy." Then Vale looked at the guards. And nodded. The guards moved, fast now. Ethan shifted to block. Sarah's phone slipped slightly in her hand. And through the speaker, Marcos screamed, "Sarah, behind you." Sarak spun, and saw Gustav. Not frozen, not shocked, moving. He had grabbed the pan from the station. The heavy metal pan, still warm. And he was raising it over Sarah's head. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the ugliest danger wasn't Vale in a suit. It was Gustav, desperate and furious, willing to silence her with his own hands. If this is the moment you'd want to look away, subscribe, because what happens next doesn't just decide Sarah's future. It reveals who Ethan Caldwell really is when violence enters the room. Gustav's arm swung down. Ethan lunged. The diner screamed. And the screen of Sarah's phone lit up with one more thing she didn't expect, an incoming message from an unknown number. A single sentence. "I have the video. Meet me now or she dies." So who else has the alley footage? And why would they threaten Sarah right now, at the exact second Gustav tries to end her? The pan came down like a judge's gavel. Sarah's body reacted before her mind could. She ducked, shoulders curling inward, phone slipping in her sweaty grip as her world narrowed to one brutal thought. Not again. Not another fire. Not another moment where she loses control. But Ethan moved faster than anyone in the room expected. He didn't hesitate. He didn't shout. He launched. Micro Cliffhanger, the billionaire who'd controlled everything with quiet words, just turned into pure instinct, like he'd been waiting his whole life for the moment he could finally act. Ethan's shoulder slammed into Gustav's chest, knocking the chef sideways. The pan clipped the edge of a chair instead of Sarah's skull, ringing out like a bell of violence. Dines skramat. Someone's glass shattered. Chairs scraped back in panic. Sarah stumbled, catching herself on the tablecloth, nearly pulling plates and silverware down. Her phone hit the floor but didn't break. The speaker still hissed faintly, Chef Marcos's panicked breathing on the line. Sarah. Marcos Chautith. Are you okay? Are you? Vale's security guard surged forward, seeing chaos as permission. Leroux shouted something useless. Stop. Stop. Like anyone in this room still cared what he wanted. Micro Cliffhanger. The dining room had crossed the line where rules matter. Now only power and speed mattered. Gustav, on the floor, scrabbled like a cornered animal. His face wasn't just angry anymore, it was desperate. He had tried to silence her and failed, and in that failure, his entire life was collapsing. He looked up at Vale, as if begging for help. Vale didn't help. Vali vachid. That was the most terrifying part, because Vale didn't look surprised. He looked evaluating, like Gustav was a disposable tool, and the tool had just broken. Micro Cliffhanger. Sarah realized Vale hadn't lost control. He was simply choosing which pieces to sacrifice. Ethan planted himself between Sarah and Gustav, breathing hard for the first time tonight. He didn't look polished anymore. He looked human, dangerous, protective. The room spun. She bent down, grabbed her phone, and saw the message again on the bright screen. I have the video. Meet me now or she dies. Her blood froze. Who sent that? And why now? Because whoever it was didn't just know about the alley footage. They knew Sarah's exact position in real time. Micro Cliffhanger. Sarah realized there was a third player in this war. Someone watching from shadows, close enough to threaten her life on a timer. Ethan saw her face change. What? He demanded. Sarah held the phone up, screen toward him. Ethan's eyes flicked over the message. The smallest muscle in his jaw jumped. Vale noticed too, because Vale's gaze snapped to Sarah's phone like a predator spotting a wound. What is that? Vale asked lightly. Too lightly. Sarah forced her voice steady. Nothing, she lied. Valis milid. Lies taste worse than bad sauce, he said, stepping forward. Give me the phone. Ethan shifted, blocking. Back off, he warned. Vale's eyes narrowed. You're protecting her phone now, too. Vale asked. How noble. He glanced at the guards. Take it. The guards moved. Ethan braced. Micro Cliffhanger. Sarah understood the next 10 seconds would decide everything, because if Vale got that phone, the unknown texter's leverage became Vale's weapon. Sarah's mind raced. If she said the message out loud, she might expose the third player and trigger the or she dies clause. If she kept it secret, she'd be dragged out, and the texter might still strike. She looked at the diners. Some were filming, hands shaking. Some were screaming. Some were frozen. And suddenly Sarah realized she didn't need to be the only target. She needed to be the loudest truth in the room. Sarah raised her voice. Everyone recording, she shouted. Don't stop. If you stop, you're helping him. A few diners snapped into action. Camera phones lifted higher, as if the act of filming was suddenly a form of self-defense. Vale's smile twitched. Micro Cliffhanger. For the first time, Sarah saw something like irritation in Vale's eyes, not because he feared cameras, but because he hated losing narrative control. Ethan leaned close to her, voice low and urgent. We need to get you out, he said. Now. Sarah's breath came fast. If I leave, he wins, she whispered. He'll say I ran. Ethan's eyes hardened. If you stay, you might die, he said. That word again. D. Sarah swallowed hard. Marcos's voice crackled through the phone, still on speaker. Sarah, listen to Ethan, he pleaded. That man, Vale, he doesn't lose. He doesn't. Vale's eyes snapped toward the phone as if the speaker itself offended him. Ah, Vale said softly. The witness is still with us. He took a step closer. Ethan stepped into his path. Vale stopped, smile gone now. "Ethan," he said low. "Move." Ethan didn't. Micro cliffhanger. The two men stood inches apart, and the entire room felt the pressure, like one wrong breath could trigger a war. Sarah's phone buzzed again. A second message, same unknown number. Back hallway. Staff door. 90 seconds. Sarah's stomach dropped. Back hallway. Staff door. Someone was inside the building, watching her, timing her. And the worst part, they weren't threatening Vale. They were threatening her. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the third player didn't want justice. They wanted control of the evidence, and Sarah was the leash. Ethan saw the second buzz. He didn't need to read it to know something escalated. "Sarah," he said tightly, "tell me what's happening." She shook her head, trembling. "Not here," she whispered. "Not in front of him." Vale's eyes sharpened at the whisper. "Secrets," he murmured. "How fun." Gustav suddenly lunged again. Not with a pan this time, but with his hands, grabbing at Sarah's apron like a drowning man. "You ruined me." Gustav screamed. Ethan shoved him back hard. Gustav crashed into a table, sending silverware flying. Diners screamed again. Security surged. Everything became motion and noise. Micro cliffhanger. The chaos became cover, and Sarah realized cover works for predators too. Sarah's eyes snapped toward the back hallway. If the texter had the video, and they wanted her at the staff door, then it meant one thing. They planned to trade. But trade for what? The recipe book? Ethan's report? Marcos's testimony? Or Sarah herself? Sarah made a decision that terrified her. She grabbed Ethan's sleeve and yanked him closer, forcing him to hear her over the chaos. "There's someone else," she whispered. "They say they have the alley video. They're inside the building. They want me at the staff door in." She glanced at the message. Less than a minute. Ethan's face went still. Vale's eyes narrowed, reading their body language like a businessman reading a contract. "What are you whispering about?" "Vale de monde." Ethan looked at Vale, expression flat. "Nothing you control," he said. Vale's smile returned, but was predatory now. "Inside the building." Vale repeated, as if tasting the idea. "Interesting. Who would dare?" Then Vale's eyes flicked to Leroux. Leroux flinched. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Leroux wasn't just scared. He looked like a man who knew exactly who was in the back hallway. Leroux stammered, "Mr. Vale, I don't know what." Vale stepped toward him, voice low. "Yes, you do," he said. "And if you lie to me, you'll join the ghosts." Leroux's face crumpled. His lips trembled. Then he whispered a name so quiet it barely carried, yet Ethan heard it. "Renee," Leroux said. Sarah's heart jolted. Renee, the pastry chef. The quiet woman who never looked anyone in the eyes. The one who always arrived early and left late. The one who avoided cameras like she was allergic to being seen. Sarah had barely noticed her. Until now. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the third player might have been standing beside her all along, wearing an apron, smiling politely, hiding a blade. Ethan's eyes hardened. "Where is she?" he demanded. Leroux pointed shakily toward the back hallway. Vale's smile widened. "Renee," he said, voice almost affectionate. "Of course. Clever girl." Sarah's stomach twisted. Vale sounded proud, like Renee worked for him. Ethan grabbed Sarah's wrist. "We're going," he said. "Now." Sarah resisted instinctively. "If we go back there." Ethan cut her off. "If we don't, she controls the next move," he said. "And she's already threatening your life." Sarah's breath caught. "How did you?" Ethan didn't answer. He just pulled. They moved through the chaos, weaving past overturned chairs and stunned diners, past security guards who hesitated to touch Ethan in public, past Gustav, blood on his lip, eyes wild. Vale called after them, voice sharp. "You walk out that door, Ethan, and I swear." Ethan didn't turn. "Save your swearing," he said. "You'll need it in court." Sarah's heart hammered as the staff corridor swallowed them. Fluorescent light, narrow walls, the smell of bleach and onions. The glamorous dining room felt like another world. Then Sarah saw her. Renee stood at the staff door, calm as a statue, holding a small USB drive between two fingers like it was a diamond. Her other hand held something else. A slim canister. Red. Sarah's blood went ice cold. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah recognized the canister instantly, not as a kitchen item, but as the kind of solvent that turns fire into erasure. Renee smiled at Sarah sweetly. "Hi," she said. "You're right on time." So why would Vale's own quiet girl carry the same accelerant used in Sarah's tragedy? And what does she really want in exchange for the video? Renee's smile didn't match her eyes. Her eyes were empty in the way of someone who'd practiced attachment, someone who could destroy a life and still eat dessert after. She held up the USB drive like a prize. "This," she said, voice gentle, "is the alley footage. Clear. Time-stamped. Faces." Sarah's knees felt weak. She'd imagined this moment for years, proof that could wipe the word arsonist off her name. Proof that could bring her father peace. Proof that could let her breathe again. But the red canister in Renee's other hand made the proof feel poisoned. Ethan stepped slightly in front of Sarah again. "Put the accelerant down," he said calmly. Renee's smile widened. "Oh," she murmured, "so you noticed." Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Renee wasn't hiding anymore. She was enjoying being seen because she believed she still controlled the ending. Sarah's voice shook. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "Who are you?" Renee tilted her head. "I'm the cleanup," she said simply. "Men like Vale build. Men like Leroux manage. Men like Gustav perform." Her gaze slid to Sarah. "And people like me make sure stories stay clean." Sarah swallowed hard. "So you work for Vale?" Renee laughed softly. "Everyone thinks that," she said. "It's convenient." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Then who do you work for?" Renee's smile flickered just a hair, then returned. "For the outcome," she said. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Renee didn't serve a person. She served a system, and systems don't negotiate like humans do. Ethan's voice stayed steady. "What do you want?" he asked. Renee lifted the USB slightly. "I want what you brought into this building," she said, eyes on Ethan now. "Your report. Your recordings. Your witness call." She glanced at Sarah. "And her recipe book." Sarah's stomach lurched. Not the recipe book. That book wasn't just instructions. It was her father's handwriting. His notes. His corrections. Little grease stains from nights he cooked while laughing. It was the last thing the fire hadn't taken. Ethan shook his head. "No," he said. Renee sighed like he was being difficult. "Then she dies," she said matter-of-factly. Sarah's blood froze. Ethan didn't flinch. He just looked at Renee like he was evaluating a dish, finding the weakness. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Ethan wasn't panicking because panic is what predators expect, and Ethan refused to feed her expectation. Sarah whispered, "Ethan." Ethan held up a hand, still watching Renee. "You're not leaving with that book," he said. Renee's eyes gleamed. "Then you're leaving without your girl," she replied. She angled the canister slightly, thumb near the nozzle. Sarah's heart slammed. That smell, chemical sharp, seemed to already live in her lungs. And then Sarah saw something she hadn't noticed before. Renee's hands. Not chef hands. Not kitchen hands. Hands with tiny scars on the knuckles, like someone who handled tools that weren't knives. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Renee wasn't a pastry chef. She was a technician of destruction. Ethan spoke softly, almost conversational. "Renee," he said, "you're making one mistake." Renee raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Ethan nodded toward the corridor behind them. "You assumed the only cameras were Leroux's," he said. Renee's smile tightened. "And?" Ethan's voice stayed calm. "And you assumed I walked in here without my own." Renee's eyes flicked, just once, down the hallway. Sarah followed her gaze and saw it. A small dome camera in the corner of the corridor ceiling. Not part of Lovely's system. New. Black. Blinking. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Ethan didn't just set a trap in the dining room. He turned the entire building into a net. Renee's smile returned, but it looked more strained. "Cute," she said, "but cameras don't stop solvent." Ethan nodded once. No, he agreed. But they stop you from disappearing. Sarah's phone buzzed again. A third message, same unknown number, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was a notification. Upload complete. Sarah's breath caught. Polat? Of what? Renee's eyes widened slightly, too fast to hide, then narrowed. Ethan saw it. You didn't send those texts, he realized. Renee's jaw tightened. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah understood the truth in a flash. Renee wasn't the puppet master. Renee was the puppet who thought she was holding the strings. A new voice spoke from behind them in the corridor, calm and familiar. Put the canister down, Renee. Sarag spoon. Chef Marcos stood there, older than Sarah remembered, but real, solid, holding his phone up like a shield. His eyes were fierce, wet with rage and regret. Ow, Sarah whispered. Marcos stepped forward. Ethan flew me in today, he said, voice shaking. He told me you'd need me. And I wasn't going to be a coward again. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Ethan's witness on speaker was never meant to stay distant. Ethan had planned for a living witness to step into the light. Renee's expression changed. Annoyance, then calculation, then something like hatred. Old man, she muttered. Marcos held up his phone. I uploaded everything, he said. Your texts. Your threats. The footage you tried to trade. Sarah's heart hammered. You have the video? She asked. Marcos Nadiv. Renee sent it to intimidate me years ago, he said. To make me recant. I kept it. His voice broke. I kept it because I was waiting for the day someone brave enough asked again. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. Renee's smile vanished. You uploaded a fake, she snapped. Marcos shook his head. No, he said. I uploaded the real thing. To multiple places. To reporters. To lawyers. To Ethan's people. He swallowed. And to the families of the other chefs you erased. Renee froze. Micro cliffhanger. The corridor suddenly felt like a coffin closing because Renee realized she couldn't contain the story anymore. Ethan stepped forward, voice low. Renee, he said, you have one move left. Put it down and walk away. Renee's eyes flicked to Sarah, like she still wanted to punish her. Her thumb twitched near the nozzle. Sarah's body tensed, ready to bolt, ready to fight, ready to do anything. Then Sarah heard footsteps, heavy, fast, coming from the dining room behind them. Vali. Security. Gustav. The war spilled into the back hallway. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the final battle was about to happen in the exact place where no diners could pretend it was just dinner. Vale appeared first, face controlled, but eyes sharp. What is this? He demanded. Then he saw Marcos. His expression tightened. You, Vale said softly like a curse. Marcos's voice shook, but he stood firm. Yes, he said. Me. Vale's gaze snapped to Renee. Renee, he said, voice icy, finish it. Renee hesitated, and in that hesitation, Sarah saw it, fear of Vale. So Renee did work for him, at least enough to fear him. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized Vale's real power wasn't money. It was the way people around him obeyed even when it destroyed them. Ethan stepped between Vale and Renee. It's over, Ethan said. Val is milid tinli. Over, he repeated. Ethan, you can't end something you don't understand. Ethan's voice stayed calm. I understand perfectly, he said. You set fires. You buy silence. You build empires on erased talent. He nodded toward Marcos. And now, your silence is gone. Vale's eyes flicked to Marcos's phone. You think uploads matter? Vale asked. I can bury uploads. Marcos lifted his chin. Not when half the room filmed it, he said. Not when Ethan Caldwell is standing here. Not when you just gave orders in a hallway camera Ethan owns. Vale's smile faltered. Just slightly. Then Vale's eyes narrowed and his voice dropped. Renee, he said again. Finish it. Renee's hand trembled. Sarah saw the truth. Renee wasn't loyal. She was trapped. So Sarah did something no one expected. She stepped forward. Ethan grabbed her arm. Sarah, don't. Sarah shook her head. I'm done hiding behind other people, she said. She looked straight at Renee. You want the recipe book? Sarah asked. Fine. Ethan stiffened. No. Sarah held up her free hand. Listen, she said, voice steady. I'll give you the book. Renee's eyes sharpened. Vale's posture subtly relaxed, as if victory was returning. Sarah continued, "But first," she said, "look at me. Really look. You've been cleaning up stories for men like him." She nodded at Vale. "Do you know what you're cleaning?" Renee's jaw tightened. Sarah's voice trembled with emotion now, but didn't break. "You're cleaning the parts of the world where talent is born," she said. "You're cleaning the parts where fathers teach daughters how to cook. You're cleaning the parts where people feed each other something real." Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized this wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was a mirror, and she was forcing Renee to see herself. Renee's eyes flickered. Vale snapped, "Don't listen to her." Sarah ignored him. "You think you're invisible," Sarah said to Renee. "But you're not. You're here. You're recorded. You're known." She gestured toward Marcos's phone. "And now you have a choice." Renee's breath caught. Ethan's voice was low. "Sarah, careful." Sarah took another step closer, slow, deliberate. "Put it down," Sarah whispered. "Not for me. For you." Renee's hand trembled harder. Vale's voice went lethal. "Renee." Renee flinched at his tone. And in that flinch, Sarah understood. Vale didn't just employ Renee. He owned her fear. So Sarah did the final, cruelest thing to Vale. She offered Renee freedom in front of witnesses. "Ethan can protect you," Sarah said. "I can testify. Marcos can testify. You don't have to be his cleanup anymore." Micro cliffhanger. Sarah saw Vale's face change, because the only thing Vale truly can't control is when a loyal tool decides to turn. Renee's eyes filled with something like panic. "He'll kill me," she whispered. Vale barked, "Stop talking." Ethan's voice cut in cold. "Threaten her," he said to Vale. "And that threat becomes evidence too." Vale's jaw clenched. Renee's hand shook. Then slowly, so slowly it felt like time was holding its breath, Renee lowered the red canister. It touched the floor with a soft metal tap. Silence. Micro cliffhanger. The moment the canister hit the ground, Vale lost his oldest weapon, fear-driven obedience. Vale's smile snapped into place again, but it was brittle. "Renee," he said softly, "you're making a very expensive mistake." Renee swallowed, voice barely audible. "I'm done," she whispered. Vale's eyes went dead. He took a step forward. Ethan moved instantly, blocking. And at that exact second, the back staff door burst open, and uniformed officers flooded the corridor, drawn by multiple emergency calls from diners, by Ethan's legal team, by the chaos too public to ignore. Vali Frozzi. Leroux crumpled. Gustav tried to retreat, but an officer grabbed his arm. Renee sank against the wall, shaking. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the police weren't here because the system suddenly became good. They were here because the story became too loud to smother. Vale lifted his hands slowly, expression controlled. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "this is a misunderstanding." Ethan's voice was calm. "No," he said, "this is accountability." An officer stepped toward Vale. "Adrian Vale," he said, "we need you to come with us." Vale's eyes cut to Sarah one last time, cold, calculating. "You think this ends me," he murmured. "You think you win." Sarah stared back, breathing hard. "I don't need to end you," she said. "I just need to stop being your victim." Vale's smile was thin as paper. "We'll see," he whispered. He was escorted away. And in that moment, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt since before the fire. Air. Real air. Not survival air. Not hidden air. Breathing air. Marcos stepped toward her, eyes wet. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For waiting." Sarah's voice broke. "Thank you," she said, "for coming." Ethan watched her quietly. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to Sarah. Inside was a set of keys and a lease. "A kitchen space," Ethan said softly. "Not owned by me. Not owned by Vale. Yours." He paused. "If you want it. No contracts that trap you. No titles that muzzle you." Sarah stared at the keys, shaking. Ethan continued, "And the first thing you put on the menu should be your father's soup. Under your name. With the truth." Sarah's tears fell, silent, unstoppable. Micro cliffhanger. Sarah realized the final revenge wasn't destruction. It was creation in full view of the people who tried to erase her. Weeks later, the city would talk about the scandal. Yes. Vale's arrest. Leroux's cooperation deal. Gustav's assault charge. Renee's testimony turned into a larger investigation. Reporters would feast on it. But the story that lasted, the one people kept telling, was simpler. A small new restaurant opened in a quiet corner of the city. No chandeliers, no pretensión, just warmth, and a dish that tasted like someone refusing to disappear. The sign on the door didn't say lovely. It said, Lancaster. Sarah stood in her own kitchen, hands steady, scar visible, and served the black truffle consommé to her first table. Not as a ghost, as a chef. If you want stories where the powerful finally face consequences and the overlooked finally step into their own name, subscribe, because the next one might hit even closer than you expect. Sarah watched the first customer lift the spoon. The same hush fell, like a prayer. And when they tasted it, they closed their eyes. Sarah exhaled slowly, feeling something like peace. But as she turned back toward the kitchen, her phone buzzed one more time. A news alert. Adrian Vale released on bail pending trial. Sarah's stomach tightened. Ethan, standing nearby, saw her face change. He's out, she whispered. Ethan's eyes hardened, not surprised. Bail isn't freedom, he said. It's just time. Sarah looked at the kitchen, at her staff, at her father's book now safe in a locked drawer. Then she looked at the door. Because outside, the world still existed. And monsters didn't become harmless just because they got arrested. So now that Sarah finally has her name back, how far will Vale go to take it from her again? And is this really the end of the fire, or just the beginning of a colder kind of war?